Hello, everyone. Welcome in the new year.
Indeed.
Happy New Year to everyone. And so we thought we start with a very, very nice topic this year, old roses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what are old roses?
Well, first of all, maybe why did you get so much into old roses? What is?
Okay, well, old roses are the roses of the poets. These are the roses that flower for a fairly short time in summer, but they hold summer. And 200 years ago, they only flowered for 5 or 6 weeks. And yet, all the romance, all the excitement, all the plays and everything were all about those roses. Mm-hmm. And they're different from our modern roses. Okay, they're not repeat flowering, but they give lots else.
And what is it? What they give? It's the romance, I would think, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not just the exquisite individual flower; it's the whole plant, and it's the perfume.
Yeah.
Today they have these amazing rose fields, but the rose they're growing is a rose from antiquity, and with all our skills and cleverness and everything else, we can't produce a repeat flowering rose that touches it.
Okay, so it's always once flowering roses that produce the rose oil and the rose water of great quality.
Damask roses.
No chance that the repeat flowering rose would do that.
Well, they may do, but it would be very indifferent by comparison. Yeah.
And, we started actually some 45 years ago here in this rose garden. My mother started, and she put all these old roses she saw in England, and she got them over here, and she just planted them wildly without any plan or whatever, idea. Actually, she didn't have the first clue about roses. And, anyways, they're standing here like for 45 years, and they look marvelous all together. So without a plan, without anything.
Well, with these roses, the colours are so subtle that you don't need to plan. You can go around, snip a whole load of them, stick them in a vase, they'll look magnificent. It's the same truth in the garden.
Yeah, so for you guys to see that, because, it's a little dull now at this time of the year, but, we show you little, flying over this garden and showing you how pretty it is in the summertime. So they are also wonderful for vase, right?
Brilliant for a vase. But the other lovely thing about them is that they really are shrubs. Mm-hmm. That's the height at which we've pruned it, but it's going to flower up here. It's going to flower at nose height.
Yeah, and then you have all that kind of wonderful scent.
And there's a silliness because you don't ask your Philadelphus or your Viburnum or your Vigilia to be repeat flowering. So if you think of these beauties as shrubs and not as roses, and forget about the repeat flowering element, then you are bringing some class into the garden. But,
we all know, like the repeat flowering roses, they started to come up like mid-1800s. Yeah. And later, of course, they all went mad about these new roses. They found repeat flowering in China and other places, brought them over to Europe, started hybridizing, got all these repeat flowering roses, which were most probably not so cool in the beginning. And I think the old-fashioned once flowering ones got a little bit kind of, pushed off the market. Is that correct?
Yeah, they did. I mean, the person who was largely responsible for bringing them back was Vita Sackville-West at Sissinghurst Castle. And she used to go around all over France finding lost wonders and reintroduce them. And then from there, other people thought, wow, let's just have a few in the mixed border just to improve the quality and the excitement of it. And so, from there was a slight renaissance for the older roses. Well, the other problem, of course, is that a number of people said, old roses are better left unpruned.
Why is that?
And actually, if you go to a number of botanic gardens throughout Europe, you see the old rose has done a huge disservice by being left a sprawling mass. Funnily enough, there were no accounts that I've come across that survived as to how to prune them. So we had to kind of reinvent it.
And that's actually exactly the point at which you started to write a book in the early 90s.
Yes.
I'm going to sort of run and get it.
Okay.
So it's this wonderful book, The Gardening with Old Roses.
Yeah.
And you actually came up with a completely new idea of how to treat these old once flowering roses in your gardens so that they make really nice and neat and romantic and super plants for gardeners. So, but I think you were kind of like criticized quite a bit for that at the beginning, weren't you?
Oh yes. They don't like it when you slaughter the sacred cows.
Okay.
But that wasn't my intention. My intention was to say, actually, if you treat these roses like you do a number of other plants, so it wasn't just a rose pruning idea, it was an idea that was adapted from other plants, then you would have a much nicer, tidier, but equally productive effect.
I know a lot of people, they read, you know, in these garden magazines, also in a lot of books and whatever, you know, they always get this, like, you know, prune above the outward-facing bud, take out all the kind of like twiggy growth, you know, the little ones that are not really thick ones. As I said before, bring air and light into the middle of the bush. Got to feed these roses like hell. They need food and food and food and whatever. So that is all not true.
It was the books that were written to produce the most exquisite hybrid teas. And they produced these flowers not for the garden, but as a competition to see who could grow the most perfect flower.
Yeah.
And those
so we are talking about beginning of the 1900s.
Yeah.
Roundabout.
And those rules applied to those plants.
Okay.
They don't apply to our modern shrub roses because they have got, you know, a better sort of, they've been better bred.
Yeah.
And it in no way applies to the old roses at all.
Okay.
So actually speaking, it's easy with old roses because providing you bring them up slowly, don't let them grow all the way up to the top in one go, then they will make a marvellous self-supporting plant.
Okay, so bring them up slowly means you purchase a rose in winter or in autumn or in spring and you plant it, and normally it has like 3 or 4 twigs.
Yeah.
And then, well, you're very happy, you know, if they grow like hell and make flowers. But this is actually not what you should have happen.
No,
you know?
What you have to do is unfortunately you have to go and prune them back.
Yeah.
So that you're building it year by year.
Okay.
And if you do that, then you have a plant that can support itself. If you let it do this all in one go, then when it flowers, it...
Okay. So a shrub like this, how many years would it have taken to build it up like that it's so nice and branchy and full and rich? How?
About 3 years.
About 3 years?
Yeah.
Okay. So in the first year, you prune it pretty hard, like 30 centimeters. In the second year, you leave it a little longer. Yeah. And in the third or fourth year, you let it get to that height.
And then you establish that as being the size that you want with that particular plant. And
we only take out actually dead wood.
Dead wood.
Like, you know, if it's frozen, if it's dried down, if it, you know, just if it's dead. And that's actually at this time of the year we really, you know, have a lot of attention to detail with that pruning.
Once the leaves are off, you can see what you're doing. And so the first thing is to whip round and take out the dead.
Okay.
Don't take out old wood because as long as it's productive, it's doing fine. I mean, we can see here, for example, that this is quite an old branch.
Yeah.
But it's wonderfully productive. And so we don't need to take it out to put in a younger shoot in its place.
Well, yeah, you can see it builds actually really nice new shoots.
Yeah.
But this is also what you read a lot, take out the big old branches to renew, to revitalize the rose. But that is actually...
But they're chasing the perfect single bloom.
Exactly.
And we want the display in the garden. We don't want it in the vase.
Okay, so... twigs are allowed to go like this, because it holds the rose too. The more twigs, the more sand it's got,
and the more twigs, the more flowers.
It's of course, and the more leaves you have on it, the more photosynthesis you've got, and then the richness comes with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's how an old rose or a rose bush shrub in your garden actually should look. We are only talking once flowering roses today. We will do another video about repeat flowering roses a little later in the year, because the repeat flowering roses, we shouldn't touch at all right now.
Definitely not.
No repeat flowering pruning at the moment. But the old roses, why can we prune them now? I know you used to prune them on Boxing Day.
Yeah, that was it. Penance for eating too much Christmas lunch.
Okay. And now it's like January, mid-January. It's we had freezing cold till 2 days ago, like with frost and everything. It's actually pretty chilly now, but much more milder. So you can obviously prune the old once flowering ones whenever during the winter.
Yeah, because these are very close to the native roses of Northern Europe, and they are adapted to growing in our climate. All right, there's all manner of wondrous hybrids that have come in from other climates, but basically they're very, very tough. And the action of pruning is not necessarily a stimulus for them to grow.
Which is
the problem with the repeat flowers. The moment you prune it, it wants to shoot off and flower.
Yeah.
So that's why we can do this now.
Yeah, so that is always our first job, more or less, here in the garden. So we prune all the once flowering roses, and this is a job out of the way. Yeah. And it's done. So sometimes people then ask, if you do it so early in the year and you get another frost with these roses, don't they die back a little more? Isn't it more work then, because I have to re-prune them before the season, or doesn't that matter?
No. These are going to sit and they're going to do nothing until the earth tilts a bit more and the soil gets warmer, and then they'll go.
Okay.
But until then, they're absolutely fine. And in any event, frost is not going to damage the shoots if they do produce any.
Okay. So one job out of the way. That's what we say, because we have so much more to look after here in the gardens. And spring is always a totally crazy time, and you will see a lot of that, what we do this spring. So we are always happy if the old roses are already done. We were talking about that building up of roses.
Yeah.
I see here a lot of roses that make actually their own suckers.
Yes, they do.
So does that contribute to getting a fatter shrub, or do all the old roses, the once flowering old roses, come up with these own suckers, or how is that?
It's the gallicas mainly that do it. And we can probably see here.
Well, we have some gallicas here,
Exactly. Well, we can see it here. It's classic sort of example.
Jenny Duval.
Yeah. And what she's done is produce suckers of herself, you see. These here, perhaps we can just pull one up just to kind of demonstrate what goes on. Oops.
No, that didn't want to come out. That looks better.
Yeah. So we can see that it's just...
Over there.
Yeah. It just sends the root out, and then from the root it sends a shoot of itself. This is not the understock.
Okay.
This is the Jenny Duval, and we can see that by the sort of thorns and the appearance of it.
2 questions. Well, they only do that when they are planted deeply in the first place,
Correct.
right? This is really what these guys out there have to know, because that's also one of these old hats, you know, you always read, like the point of union should be above the ground, but you always say point of union has to go 5 centimeters under the ground, because then they do this.
Exactly.
You know? And very often it's very helpful to have these suckers, you know, of their own roots, because it makes a nice full bush.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it can also start getting on your nerves, because some of them, like the gallicas, a lot of them really do that wildly, and they kind
of... two things. I think, first of all, with the gallicas, that must be the exception to the rule, planting-wise, that you want to actually plant it so it's just above the soil and can't do that. On the other hand, once you see it doing it and it starts coming out in an area where you don't wish it to be, it's quite an easy job with a spade, just to whiz around.
Spade or rip them out. Don't prune them, because if you prune them, they multiply, right?
Yes. If you prune them down to the ground, then you just do that.
Okay.
But
I know these guys out there, they like to have their own little experiments, you know, and a lot of them will think now, so, oh, cool, I have these suckers in the garden too. Could I just rip them out and grow them on in pots and make new roses of them? How would you do that?
It's very, very straightforward. You can see that even here it's starting to make its own roots.
You have to show that.
Yeah. So
you put them in a pot, or what do you do?
Yeah, normally in a pot, but I mean they'll do equally well in sort of the vegetable garden as well. What you must do, though, is to prune it so that the top and the bottom are in balance.
Okay. So, and then you have a new plant.
Then you've got a new rose.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
And how do you get that now? You know, if you plant that, it's just one stem. How do you get that to kind of like get fat and bushy and branchy?
Well, it will probably produce 2 or 3 from this point.
Okay, it's coming here.
And it's very important to, as they start to grow, snip them back to get a nice little fat bush. Because if you don't, you're just going to get a very long, thin, untidy plant that really isn't going to give you very much. But once they've started like this, they live forever, of course.
So this is also a little bit a matter of greed, right? We are always, everyone, you know, we are always a little greedy in our gardens, you know.
Sure.
So in the first year, don't necessarily expect to go for flowers. You know, better to just establish them nicely, prune them back so that they branch out, that they get all these little kind of twiggy growths and more. And then, but you could also sort of, you know, if you have like 3, 5 or whatever of those, you could also plant them in a group. Then it's actually a little easier for you to build a plant, a nice bushy, shrubby plant out of it, right?
Yes, I mean, why not? But you've got to be disciplined. Otherwise it's going to get just to be an untidy thicket.
Okay. Before we go back over, well, maybe we go back over there to the Isfahan. John, I'm going to keep that and pot that up, and then we can show that another time. So we have the Isfahan rose here, which is a damask rose, which is that kind of like example for enormous scent, wonderful flowers. And you don't really care, you know, that it's only like 4 or 5 years, for 4 or 5 weeks a year. It is so epic, really, that you just enjoy it in that during that time. Scent, I just wanted to, before we start pruning here, scent is very, very important, and also in aromatherapy. And I know you are actually writing a book at the moment about the healing rose, because, well, I experience that during rose flower time every morning. When I come in here, I get that scent, and I'm just, it just lifts me up like no tomorrow. It just goes straight in my brain somehow, or in my heart, or somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
So the new book, The Healing Rose, what's it? Just 4 sentences about it, what it's going to be, and when it's coming out.
Well, roses were used historically, particularly by the Greeks and the Romans. And then later, in the golden age of Isfahan, rose was used because the flowers have the most amazing antiseptic properties, and they're tremendous for healing wounds. And so, you know, the gladiators used to get stitched up.
Well, they needed it.
But lots of rosewater was actually used because they knew, they didn't understand how to sterilize things, but they did know that it prevented the wounds going rotten. And then later, civilizations, India and China, started to use the rose. But as you were saying, for its uplifting scent as much as to use as a medicine.
So there's actually a very nice video, older video John did some years ago. He traveled to Turkey and places,
That's right,
you know,
yeah.
and there you can actually find a lot of information about the rose fields and about distilling rose water and rose oil and all these kinds of things we do. And your book, I think, you know, we're about to, well, it's not yet released. We are just, you know, getting it all organized and illustrated and stuff, but I think it's going to come out this year. And you are also working on a second or a third version of the old roses,
yes,
or well,
exactly.
which is not only once flowering roses, also contains all the repeat flowering old roses. These are the roses which were bred before 1867 and are repeat flowering, right?
Yeah, basically, yes.
And so, but with climate change, I think that's what triggered you to do a new book, right? Because
yes,
everything has changed a lot.
Yes, I mean, a lot of the old conventions that we used to have here up until 2 years ago, and then we sort of decided together that we would change because the potential for climate change to completely undo the garden is still there. So we've had to adapt and change. And so I sort of thought, well, it would be useful for gardeners to kind of follow the thinking behind it to see what we can do. And also, you know, what can you do with very hot, dry summers?
It's going to be really exciting in a special way what's coming up there.
Yes.
And of course you can follow all that here on the channel. And one more tip maybe for you, we also have a German channel, Landhaus Zettenbühl, with tons of videos. Obviously a lot of these videos influenced by John's knowledge and John's experience, and you can actually listen to these videos, which are naturally in German, but there's a little button down there somewhere, we show it to you, you know, and then you can just click on the translation and then you get it all, you know, in nice American English, I think, not British English. Okay. And so can listen to all these videos too, if you feel like you want to get even more information. Okay, so John, I'm going to get my gloves and my secateurs. Let's do some little practical examples. You once taught me, wow, this is the pruning height, right? We take that rose down to every year.
Yep.
And this is the flowering height. And it's all about architecture, right?
Yeah.
Architecture is the golden rule there. Tell us a little bit about architecture.
Well, first of all, the important thing to do is to get stuck into the rose at the very beginning of your pruning and take out the dead. That's what matters, because the dead stems have the potential to carry disease spores on them.
Exactly.
So that's the important thing, is to go around and get these guys out.
Also, all these little ones here go down. This comes out like this. This is very nice of it. And,
this is nice of it.
Yeah. And also, like all these dead ends right here, which is a potential for disease. Okay, so now we assume we took all the dead out. Sure. Now we're going to go and do the pruning here. No looking for outward facing buds or anything.
You'd be here for a couple of months if you were.
Oh yeah, you would. So to make it a little easier, I always think it's nice for the people if they say, okay, this is my pruning height. I have my bamboo here, because that makes it a little easier for them to see to where they are pruning back. And so we just start. And
yeah, I mean, it's there's nothing difficult about it at all. It's but what you have to do is to have some sort of an eye for the architecture, because if you prune it into a nice shape, it will flower to a nice shape.
So a nice shape is like round, right?
Yeah, it's a sort of, it's like a sort of, it's a sphere.
So you don't want to just prune it bang like that, so that you have all the flowers here. You want to,
Exactly, and we want it to flower basically from the ground upwards. That's what we want to do. The more twiggy growth we have lower down, the greater the chances are that we're going to succeed in our ambition.
Yeah. So what I also learned from you is always, when you're pruning, whilst you're pruning, stand back from time to time and look what you're doing,
Yeah, absolutely.
All the mothers who have sort of cut their kids' hair before, they know that problem. Sometimes, you start to sort of cut here, cut there, and it gets shorter and shorter. So
unless you use a pudding bowl.
Well, whatever. So always stand back, see where you are, where you're going, so that it get nice balanced look of your rose. And you can see that here all over these roses, that they're nicely kind of like shaped,
And that reflects in how the garden looks when it's in flower.
And it's also like you don't only have sort of like low in the front and then you go up in stages. You want to have this kind of like wave in here, right?
Absolutely. And those varieties, like the celestial in the middle there, that are bigger, we want them to achieve that sort of height so that it moves and undulates rather than sort of being soldiers.
Exactly. Okay, so come on. We're going to finish that with our next course. We have a rose pruning course in March.
Yes, we do.
So for that,
absolutely.
for that time, that rose has to stay here so that we have a nice example for our people in the course. And, well, there was a lot of information.
Good.
Hope you guys liked it. And we'll be coming out soon with another video about all sorts of things we're doing here, and especially also more pruning and of the repeat flowering roses.
And when it gets a bit warmer, we can have fun with the climbers on the walls.
And with the climbers on the walls, that's a biggie too. And maybe we also show them what to do with your species roses. That's always a big question, how to prune your rose hedges, because rose hedges are a big subject. But, well, if you're very curious, as I said, have a look on our German channel too. Get it translated for you, and then you can gather a lot of information already. John, thank you very much as ever. See you next time. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked it, like and subscribe, and then see you next time.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.